Ladies and gentlemen, you're rocking with a GOAT. Kenn Dowell giving you motivation for growth. 2 toes down, he keep it realer than most. He do it for the culture, that's always the goal. This is Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell. This is Strategic Moves with Kenn Dowell.
Not going to keep you long because I know that was a long day for you and things of that nature. So I just want to go over and have an opportunity to talk to you, man. I want people to get an opportunity to know a little bit more about you. The reason of me, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this YouTube channel was to give people an opportunity to meet people who I thought were interesting, people who I'd have met over the years, who I thought would have done some really extraordinary things and have been able to get through some of this and to introduce them to new people as well. So I want to talk to you about your book. I know you wrote a book, and your book is The Least Likely, Memoirs of Judge Micheal Ryan from Housing Project to the Courthouse. Why don't you tell me what inspired you to write the book and what a little bit about the book there?
Okay, the inspiration to write the book came from the multiple times I had went out and spoke, be it a commencement address that I made or at career day, or I was invited to some type of speaking event, maybe at a church doing men's day or youth day, or I just had an opportunity to talk to a group of young people, or one time I was at the Tri-C Cleveland State Joint Dr. Martin Luther King breakfast. And after I normally finish talking and people hear my story, they're like, when are you going to write a book? And I said, whenever I get time, because I said, I'm working as a judge. I'm doing these events. I'm a father, husband, and my time is somewhat limited. But because I kept getting so many requests, I said, let me just sit down and make some time. And so from I'm going to say 2000, because I got elected in 2005, took the bench in 06 and start speaking at these places. About 2008, I sat down and said, let me just dictate, because I was trying to write. I couldn't write because every time I started to think about what I had gone through, I got real emotional. And so the paper would be wet from crying. So I said, let me just dictate it. And I dictated into a tape recorder and then have somebody actually do the word processing for me. Yeah, and so it took a long time, though.
How long did it
about
take?
7 years
to put it all
for me
together?
to put it together and get it to a place where I was somewhat satisfied with it. But a lot of writers have told me, as well as editors, that you're never really satisfied with the finished product. So,
well, it's like with anything. It's like I said with this. At some point, you had to just say, yes, I got to go ahead and write this book, because you'll constantly keep doing things and keep putting it off until I can really dig that.
So that's what happened. But finally, so 2015 is when I officially published it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So tell me, I read some portions of the book. My daughter is reading part of it. She's my researcher for some of these podcasts and everything. So I gave her the book and she was reading it. And so give us the short version of your book, or the unabridged version of the book.
Well, I don't know if I can say short. You give a microphone to a judge.
You said you were tired, so I figured you'll work it out. You gonna talk, or you gonna give me the short version?
The book chronicles from when my mom and my biological dad met, until the time that I won my first election for Cleveland Municipal Court. And so it talks about the struggles that my family had in the beginning, because my mom was only 14 when she met my father. And
How old was your father?
He was 22. I don't know if he knew how young my mother was, but I don't know how he couldn't, because she was really petite. My mom, she was like 4 feet 11, and even at that time, she probably was maybe 80 some pounds. So she was little. And my dad, he's 6'3". Yeah, he's big. He's tall. He was a tall guy. And they met at a talent show at East Tech.
Really?
My mom, I don't think should have been there, for one, and my dad was already too old to be
he
at the school, right?
Really? Right, he shouldn't have been there.
And she's the one who caught his attention, and that's the beginning of the story. And they had a whirlwind love affair. I don't know if you can say that. She wound up getting pregnant at 14, and he disappeared because he was into some trouble. He had been robbing some banks. And he had to get ghost as fast as he could. And he wound up getting caught on about maybe, I want to say a year and a half later, and he wound up going to prison. So I was about 1.5 years old when he went to prison.
Wow. Okay.
He went to prison, federal prison for those bank robberies.
How many banks he robbed?
2. It's kind of funny. I talk about it in the book because my grandmother, she had to fill in a lot of gaps for me. And then I met him when I was much older, and he filled in some gaps too. By the time I started to find out a little bit about the story, my mom was already gone. But yeah, and so it was just, my mom was somebody who didn't let, as my grandmother say, let the grass grow under her feet. So after she was pregnant with me, she met my sister's father.
Okay.
And I thought for most of my life that was my real dad. And because he was there when I was born, made me a part of his family. To this day, those are my nieces and nephews, uncles, and not nieces and nephews, cousins. His nieces and nephews are my cousins, brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles, mother and father, my grandparents. I mean, his mother, I only know her as my grandmother.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when did you find out he wasn't your father?
I'll talk about this in the book too, but it was, my mom told us. And what happened is that my sister and I ran track for the summer.
Okay.
And we had to get our birth certificates. And we were living with my grandma Lula, his mom at that time. And my grandmother got the birth certificates, but I don't even think she knew what was on our birth certificates. So my sister saw the birth certificates.
Wow.
She saw my mom's name from her, saw daddy's name for her. And then when she saw mine, she only saw my mother's name on mine. And for father, it was blank.
Wow.
And so she was kind of confused. She was like, hey, how come daddy's name isn't on Michael's? So she went and asked my grandmother, and my grandmother didn't say anything. And at this time, my mom was still alive, and we were still visiting with her off and on. So she asked my mother, and my mother said, I got something to tell you guys.
That's deep. Hey, you know what? I'm going to tell you how I could relate to that. I think I just found out, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that somebody said that the guy who I thought was my father wasn't my father.
Wasn't?
Oh, yeah. And I'm like 50, when this dude shows up. And well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to just say, we're going to get back on your thing. When you find out, and I'm going to keep this 100, when you find out that you may have an estranged relative or something out there, you really hope for the best.
You do.
You hope that, I hope that motherfucker is Bill Gates.
You know what? When my mom told me, I was thinking, because I figured that there was something different. If you see my sister and I, you would know that we don't have the same two parents, because my sister is really fair skin. I'm talking about fair skin. She is sometimes almost pale and has hazel eyes.
Right.
And so I'm quite obviously our complexions are way different. And then my dad, I call him dad because I didn't know what other name to use. We just had different personalities,
right?
Different interests, the whole thing. And it was just always this disconnect between us. And so when my mom told me, I wasn't too surprised. But then, like you, I'm thinking, who is my dad and where is he?
Right.
I'm thinking one day he's gonna ride up in here in a Cadillac,
right?
Take me out to Pepper Pike. This is my house
Exactly.
with him and his wife and kids.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that wasn't the story.
Wasn't the story for me. I ended up with some old buster, lived over off Cedar. I'm like, Cedar? 101st to see that. And I call him a buster because I'll talk about that one other day. But he wasn't, and he still ain't jack. Yeah. So back to your story and going back to you about your memory. So I can totally relate when you talk about getting surprised and thinking one thing is something else. But throughout your book and throughout your story, you had plenty of those. Plenty of those. You know, a lot of. Let's talk about this. I want to talk about some of what you would say was your worst experience as a child growing up. Is something I know you talk in your book, and you mention as we talk a lot about your mom dying and that kind of thing. And I know that, but let's really give me some of the things that you think that really you can think of that you think was just really bad as when you was growing up.
I talked about my mom's size, and just for clarification purposes, my stepdad, he was slightly bigger than me, but not as big as my biological father. He was about 6 feet. and maybe about 180 pounds. But my mom, real small. And so I have some, vivid memories as a kid of him being just brutal to my mom. And I would I would hear first my mom screaming and yelling for help. Sometimes it would awake me at night, and then I would run to where I hear the screams coming from, only to see the man who I thought was my father pick my mom up and slam her on the floor, or slam her up against a wall, or slam her on the bed. And then at times I would see him take his knee and put it into her chest. At times he would stomp her, punch her, slap her, strangle her. And as a kid, I'm thinking that parents are supposed to love each other. They're supposed to protect each other.
And how old were you around that?
I was 4, and this happened from the time I was 4 all the way up until I was 11. And the only reason why it stopped when I was 11, because he went to prison.
Wow.
And he went to prison not for beating my mom, but for aggravated burglary.
So, he was out stealing too. Then.
Yeah, these 2 role models I'm supposed to have. These father figures, they were.
What was he doing? Breaking into houses?
He was breaking into houses because of his drug addiction.
So he had a drug problem.
So did my mom.
Okay.
My life was complete chaos. So I was watching that, and then because I was the oldest, I was responsible for trying to, help my mom heal after all of the beating. So I was getting her the face towel to wipe the blood up. I was getting her paper towel or a napkin to wipe the blood, getting her a face towel, put ice in it so she could bring the swelling down. I had to watch the lady who I thought was one of the most beautiful women in the world always have to hide her bruises with makeup or put these sunglasses on because my dad had blackened her eyes. Watching that as a kid, that was horrific. And then the drug abuse.
I said drug addiction. That's a whole nother monster by itself. Because once he's gone, then now you think everything out. Now here comes the real demon is the drug addiction.
The drug. But I saw both of them engaging in it while he was there. They would, and I'll talk about this in the book in terms of the smell from them burning the drugs. And then they had the tools up on their dresser. So when I would go in the room to go get the TV, there's the drug paraphernalia.
What was they
right
doing?
There.
Smoking or?
Oh no, they were shooting up.
They were shooting up.
They were shooting up.
Wow.
Yeah. And my mom, in addition to the bruises and stuff on her, I saw all the marks on her arms, on her legs. I saw the marks on my stepdad's arms. And it's just, I don't know how a kid or parents can put their kids through that, but that addiction had a tremendous hold on both of them, where that was their complete focus, and a lack of support and awareness of, for me and my sister.
That is hard, especially IV drug users, man, when they using that and heroin use and that kind of thing is really hard. And it's tough on everything. It's tough to kick it. It's tough for the whole thing. So I can imagine that was terrible. You say you grew up in the Longwood.
Oh, yeah.
Down in Longwood?
We actually moved around a lot. When I was first born, we lived in the, I want to say, Mount Pleasant area from what I remember. No, let me take that back because my uncle went to Kennedy. And so it had to be in the Lee Harvard area where we first lived when I was born. And then we moved to Cleveland Heights, actually.
Okay.
My grandmother wound up buying a house out there, and she told my mom, you can come with Mike because he made a mistake. I understand that. She said, but if it happens again, no, that's not a mistake. You did that on purpose. So we were there for about maybe a year and a half in Heights, and then my mom got pregnant again, and my grandmother said, that's it. I'm not taking care of you and 2 kids. And then my uncle also had 2 kids. And so my grandmother and my grandfather, step-grandfather, they left. And they said, we out.
That's
he said, y'all, you guys acting like adults. We're going to treat you like adults.
So they got out. They didn't kick you out. They just said, we going to leave.
They said, we leave. They said, we'll leave that up to you guys.
That's cool.
And so we wanted to move into the Mount Pleasant area. From Mount Pleasant, my mom actually, because my father was so abusive, stepdad was so abusive, She sent us to California, and then she followed us and didn't let him come. He wound up coming out there after we've been living in California for about a year. And she let him come back. They were good for a while, but then they started using drugs out there, and everything collapsed. We came back to Cleveland.
Wow.
And lived with one of my stepdad's sisters, and I was on Union. We lived there for a couple of months, then moved to Gorman and lived there for a couple of months. And after living on Gorman, the family just completely collapsed because my mom started working and my stepdad lost his job, all probably due to their drug use, and that's when we went to Longwood. So I lived in Longwood the longest that I had lived in any other neighborhood. So I was in Longwood for 4 years.
Wow.
And being in Longwood, they didn't have to pay as much for rent or utilities. So the majority of the money went to go to that drug
That was
habit.
back in the day when the Jets was the Jets.
Yeah.
So you was really down in there.
Ooh.
What was some of your experience of being out in Longwood? Give me some good times in Longwood.
The good times were being able to go to across the street from our apartment building and the icy lady. We'd get ices for 25 cents. So I was able to scrunch up 25 cents here and there, go get me an icy.
Right. I understand.
Playing football with my friends. We used to play in the grassy area by the office. I don't know if many people know where that is. If you talk about Longwood, going swimming at Longwood Pool, going to the church across the street, Tri-Stone Baptist Church. They had a 4-H club that you can go to. So I went there not just to participate in 4-H, but to eat too, because my parents, they weren't feeding us. I'm talking about good times is that neighbors they knew that my sister and I weren't eating. They would give us meals. They weren't shy about doing that and opening their doors for us. So those were good times. Playing on the Willie Walls. I don't know if anybody knows about the Willie Walls. It was a concrete playground where you jump from wall to wall and you play chase on the wall.
That was it.
That was it. I was like, I think they put this here to try to kill us, but it actually made us more athletic.
Right.
Because the walls, they were thin. They were like balancing beams. And you had to run over there. You had to jump from wall to wall, playing tag, playing chase, see who could be the king of the Willie Walls. And those times were fun. And just having friends that I created good relationships with down in Longwood.
You say you attended 11 different schools.
11.
Yeah.
When you taught from kindergarten to 10th grade. So,
and which school sticks out to you the most that you would say, you know what, if it wasn't for this school, because at this time in my life, I really needed
Miles Park, because that's when I transferred from Tremont to Miles Park, because of my grandma Lula. She told me, because I was living with another family at that time, so that I could continue to go to Tremont and also allow me to stay close to my mom, who was still in Longwood at that time. The bus would take us to Longwood, and I just wanted to check up on her. And so my grandmother found out that I was doing that, because she already had my sister. She said, either you're going to go into foster care or you're going to live with me. And so I was like, I'll go live with you. And so I moved to Miles Park, but it was there that I got a chance to really blossom.
How old were you there?
11 when I wound up at Miles Park. So that was 6th grade. There, I had the stability that I needed living with my grandmother. We were eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner living with her. She wasn't taking us out to the trap houses like my parents were. She wasn't coming home high like they were. And she was there 24 hours with us. Whenever we needed her, it wasn't a moment's notice that she wasn't going to be available. We didn't have that with my parents, unfortunately. And so it was there that I really started to hit my stride in terms of, it's just doing really well academically. And Mr. Bruce Hill, who was my 6th grade teacher, he noticed that I was a little bit more advanced than my classmates. And in fact, I talk about this story because when I came to Miles Park, Mr. Hill's traditional philosophy was like everybody starts at ground zero.
Okay.
And so he had an F row, D row, C row, B row, A row. And I was always a good student, so I started off in the F row, and I was like, oh, wait.
All right.
And he said, don't worry. He said, if you're a good student, you'll advance. And so that first week, I moved from F to D, from D to C, and then from C to B within probably a month of being at the school. But I couldn't crack the A roll. Those were really good students, and the only way you moved out is if they did poorly. And I went to him one day after school, and I was crying. I was like, listen, Mr. Hill, I'm not a B student. So I'm an A student.
Okay.
And he said, Michael, there's no room in the A row. And he said, I can't kick a kid out because they're doing well and replace you. And I said, okay, I understand. But I went back to school the next day. He created another desk in the A row, and I never left.
Excellent.
And then he said, I'm going to recommend that you go to Major Work, or the honors program for Cleveland. And he said, you'll be behind these kids because most of them start out in third grade. They do that evaluation and the assessment. He says, but don't worry. I know that you'll be successful. You'll catch up to them. And sure enough, he did the application for me. And by the end of the school year, they had accepted me. Notwithstanding the fact that I hadn't started in third grade like most of the other students. I tested well, and that put me on the trajectory to where I am today. So had it not been for going to Miles Park and meeting Mr. Hill, I don't know if I would, be in the position I'm in today.
Wow, that's huge. If you can think back on all the stuff that you done been through, and I know there's been times that you done sat back and just wish things was different.
Yeah.
And if you would have had another start, have you ever thought about that? Hey, if my parents would have been doctors, I could have maybe been this or that. Or do you think how your struggle is kind of what really helped you shape who you are today?
No, I think my struggle shaped who I am today. I know it was traumatic what I went through, and I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I definitely didn't want any child to have to go through what I did, but I don't think I would be the person I am today without having those experiences. And I'm a faith guy. I believe that it was purposeful and intentional on God's part to have me to go through those things so that I did overcome those, so that I'm a testimony for other people about God's grace and his mercy and the gifts that he gives you, and being able to use those appropriately to be in certain positions. And so that's how I feel that God wanted me to go through that for a reason.
Right, I'm both sharing in the experience of being able to say that we had opportunity to know and have the pleasure of dealing with Bishop Ellis.
Yes.
He married me and my wife 25 years ago, and that was a whole experience in itself. I grew up in going to church. My grandmother and grandfather were pastors, and we had a little bitty church on 152nd off of Waterloo.
Okay.
And it was a trip because back in those days, man, we used to go to that church, and it was in the Collinwood area. And back then they didn't want black folks in Collinwood. So we used to go to church, man. They used to set the porch on fire. They used to write niggas go home on the church.
Really?
I mean, it was all kinds of crazy stuff. And my grandmother and grandfather, he was a pastor, and my grandmother played the piano. So we literally went to church all day. Like we would take our food, pack our dinner, go to church. They finished first service, eat in the basement, and stay there for second service, or a church coming in and all. Did all that. All the way until I think I was maybe about 17 years old, and she called me. She used to go wake everybody up for church, and I was like, I ain't going. She was like, I'm just going by myself. And she started going by herself. I stopped going. But then when I got back into, the church was so small. I was the deacon in the church. I was everything because we was just a small group.
I know that.
When I got older, I was like, I want to go to a big church. I want to go big church. I'm tired of these small. If I'm going to go to church, I want to go to big church. And so that was a really big church.
Yes.
I had a guy I knew was going there, and he talked to me about going there, and I went there. When we went there, though, it was a big church, and there wasn't a lot of people in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Bishop had just got there, I think not too many years from
Because
there.
Pastor Bishop Watkins had died.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Bishop had just got there, and he was starting to get the church going.
Because there was a split when
Very
Bishop
split.
Watkins
Exactly.
died. Yeah.
And so it was a small church. They were building up and everything. I'll tell you, it was this small that when I was going there, Bishop would get up in the middle of church and say, Ken, did you propose to that girl yet? And I was like, no. Then he called me one service. He called me up. Now that's a big church, right? And again, this is like when it wasn't too many people there. It was just, it was big enough, but he knew who I was, definitely. And he called me up in the middle of church. It was like, come here. I come up and walk all the way up there, and he whispered, man, did you? And he did this at least 2 or 3 times. So he finally did that, and he got me and the church, and we ended up getting married, and he did our whole ceremony and everything.
He's very persuasive. He was still doing that up until the time that he got sick. Yeah. So,
Now, I'll tell you why I left the church. I left the church because the church got too big.
oh.
Now, when
okay.
I got there from a position of Bishop being able to call me out the audience, come on up, and do all of that, to, okay, if your last name begin with this initial, you go to
This elder.
And they started breaking it down like that. And then where I used to be able to go see the bishop, you got to make an appointment and this and that. And I was hearing other people who may have wanted to do stuff that I thought I was able to. And they was like, oh, no, you can't get in there and this and that. I just like, oh, things have changed and it just got too big. And that's when I ended up going back to a smaller church and ended up going to Reverend Harris Church.
Oh, really? Okay.
After it all was said and done, I ended up going to Mount Olive.
Mount Olive.
Yeah.
Just tell them how small Cleveland is. Reverend Harris played football with my uncle.
Yeah, you must have went to Kennedy.
Yes. He played with my uncle, and he played with C.J. Matthews.
Okay.
All 3 of them played together. Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I had a lot of good lessons learned and understanding coming out of that church. So and you still go there now.
I'm still there. I'm a deacon there and on the board of directors. At least I think I'm still on the board of directors. I'm not sure. We had a vote, so I'm not sure if they voted me back in or not. But yeah, we've been there for let's see, 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 15 years now. Yeah.
So how your faith plays a role in your decision making on the bench, on your life, and how you believe in your family bringing in all of that. How you feel about that?
I think just doing what's right, being conscientious of individuals and knowing that people make mistakes. People should be given opportunities to correct those mistakes. I know at times the law restricts what I can do. But the times that I have discretion, that's where my faith, I think, plays a huge part, because I think but for the grace of God, there go I in those situations. Those kids that come before me, or the families for the abuse, neglect, and dependency matters. And it doesn't control what I do, but it's a factor in what I do.
Your faith and having that relationship. Tell me about the relationship with the bishop.
We were pretty close. When I first came to the church, it was actually, I was campaigning. And that was my first time meeting him. Okay. And someone else actually made that connection for the 2 of us. And I don't even think he heard him. He hadn't heard my testimony, couldn't have, because he let me speak. And when I was talking about the things I had gone through, he had a microphone on. And I could hear him saying, that's me. So every time I said something that was really traumatic about growing up, he said, that's me. And he would say again, that's me. And so after I finished, and the church was crying, right. I think Bishop was crying too. He said, whatever you need, let me know. And he said, I don't know about all that. He said, I can't tell y'all who to vote for. Right. He says, but if I had a vote, because he was living in Chester then, Chesterland then, he said, I would be voting for him. And he said, he told me to come back and give him, I think it was about 700, 800 pieces of literature. And he said, and give me 20 or 30 bags. and I don't know what he did with it, but some rumors is that because he was overseer over a number of churches here, that he gave that literature to them and said, pass this out to your congregations. And I wasn't a member then. I was attending Emmanuel Apostolic Church on the west side of Cleveland. But after I won, I wanted to come back and say thank you. And so I came back and we said thank you. And then a couple of weeks later, we were back again. And he saw us. He said, Judge, what you doing back here? And I said, just enjoying service, Bishop. And then we came back again maybe 3 weeks later. And my daughter and my son got up and joined the church. My wife and I, we were like...
So your daughter and son joined the church?
They joined church before we did.
Really?
So they joined, and then we followed right behind them.
That's interesting. Excellent. So let's talk about your family. I know. How long you been married to Robin, Miss Robin?
26 years.
26 years.
26 years,
Oh, okay.
yes.
Well, that's good. So how you guys met, and tell me that.
We didn't meet at church. We met on the day after New Year's, January 2nd, 1993. And the reason why I know that day so clearly is because I did not want to go.
Really?
I had just broke up with my old girlfriend, and my guy was my best man at my wedding. He was like, man, no need to cry over spilled milk. Let's go out and let's just kick it. And I was like, I don't feel like it. But this dude is like 6'8", almost 300 pounds plus. He was like, he came over to my house, was like, Mike, you going? Right. So I said, all right, man, all right. We went out, and then I learned from my wife that she didn't want to go out that night either.
Really?
But her girls, they came, went in her closet, got an outfit out for her, did her hair for her.
Okay.
And we all met. We all went to the Splash.
Oh, down in the Flash.
Down in the Flash. And
that was the Jamaican spot.
It was reggae night.
Right.
Reggae night. And I like to dance, but my wife Robin is a phenomenal dancer. She's so good that she used to dance.
Louis Moore?
Yeah, Louis Moore.
Everybody know Louis, right.
So Louis had this group, and she was a part of the group. So they would be the dancers for opening acts.
Wait. Louis had a group of dancers, you saying?
Yes.
What was the group of dancers doing?
What was the name? Oh, she told me the name. I forget the name of the group. Oh, my Robin's going to...
Solid Gold Dancers.
But you got to ask Louis. They were just...
All right, we put shouts out to Louis Moore. Louis been doing it a long time, so I can imagine it was something that had to do something with entertainment.
Yeah. And so he had them dancing all over the place. They opened up for... Digital Underground. They opened up for Queen Latifah.
Okay.
They just, I don't know if they opened up for Janet Jackson or not, but my wife was so good of a dancer that she was known around the city, around the county as Little Janet.
Really?
Little Janet Jackson, because she danced that well.
Okay.
So we get down there and I see her across from the club, and she's cute. So, and she was just dancing by herself, and nobody had asked her to dance. So I just walked over there. Now, she going to tell you a different story. I walked over there, and I just put my hand out, and she grabbed my hand, and we walked on the dance floor, because we had been looking at each other. And so I don't know if I should have did that, because she was so good. I was like, man, I'm not that good.
Right. She started potlocking.
Yeah. She was doing all this stuff, and I was like, oh. And she didn't stop either. Right. I got tired after about half an hour. So I said, you know what? I got to go sit down and get something to drink. I said, but make sure, I said, you promised me we're going to dance before the night's over again. She was, I promise. And I didn't get her name, because I'm thinking that we're going to dance again. Some dude walks in, one of her friends that used to like her, didn't like her anymore, but he knew that she was trying to holler at me. So he was all over her. So I thought it was her man. So we didn't dance anymore that night. And then we got on the floor for the last dance, and we slowed it down. And I was dancing with my dude's cousin, who was real short. She about my mom's height. Right. So I could see over her. And the dude that was all over her, he was short. So she could see over him.
Wow.
And so I told her, I said, you played me.
Oh, y'all talking?
Yeah, we talking to each other while we dance with somebody else.
All right.
And she was like, I'm sorry.
Really?
And then she started giving me her phone number. She was doing this behind his back. I was like, hold up, one more time, because I didn't get it. I got her number, and then I had to go get a piece of paper and write it down. And then she came before Splash closed and gave me her number with her name on it.
Okay. Excellent.
And so that's how we met.
Excellent. And you guys dated for a while, then you gone
We dated for a year before I proposed, and then 2 years before we got married.
Excellent. Okay. And so then you had children. Let's talk about them. You had a son and a daughter, right?
And what's actually funny is that she already had Lauren before we met. But because of the close relationship between Lauren and I, people think that's my daughter.
Excellent.
So,
so how old was Lauren when you got?
Lauren was only a year and a half old when we met. So and I don't know if I tell the story in the book or not, but my wife was telling me, she said, listen, Lauren is so funny acting with people. And it was going to be my first time meeting her. I came over for dinner. She said, so if she's shy, she's standoffish, don't worry. She just doesn't take to people. And you're a stranger too, so don't be offended. I came into the house. I met Ma and Tanisha, which was my wife's niece. And I went and sat on the couch. And next thing I know, here comes Lauren running around the corner. And she comes right up to me, starts talking to me, and then jumps right on my lap. And we are engaged in this conversation. And then I hear Robin, because she had peeked around the corner. She said, Ma, come here. She said, look, Lauren on his lap. And I don't know how much conversation you can engage with a 1-year-old, but she had a pretty good vocabulary at that age. But we were talking, she's having a good time, and she didn't seem at all scared of me or anxious about talking to me. Wasn't standoffish. I mean, she's sitting on my lap talking to me.
So she got a good vibe from you.
Yeah,
she got a good spirit.
And so I think that was a plus for me with my mother-in-law and my niece and my wife.
So tell us more about Miss
Lauren.
She didn't graduate?
Yeah.
Before she graduated, what kind of student she was?
Lauren was a top tier student, and we had so many. From the time that I met her, she was always trying to learn. For Christmas, Robin bought her this desk. I mean, 2 years old, and she was learning how to spell at 2. Because I was about to go to law school at that time, but when I was in law school and I would come over, I would read my books, and there would Lauren, she'd be studying right there with me. So I'm reading the law school books, and here she is. She doesn't know how to read, but she's listening. And I'm just developing that love for learning with her at that time. And it didn't stop. And so when she was in middle school, when she was in elementary school, middle school, high school, college, and graduate school, she was always a stellar student and always wanted to be, get the top grade. She was devastated when she didn't do well academically. So
I remember hearing you say that really got upset about a grade she didn't get on an exam or something. And she really got upset about
she
that.
Was, and she vowed never to do that poorly again. But poor to her was a C-.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
She definitely wasn't failing in classes, and if there was any issue about that, it was due to a teacher or instructor, not to Lauren. And Lauren, I don't know if she just reminds me so much of me, and that's not even my natural child, just because of her drive and her thrive for excellence in every single thing that she does.
Give me one of your best moments for her with you. Now, it could have been what you already told me. It could be something else. What's your best moment?
Best moment with
Most
her?
proud of you. The best thing about that. What do you think?
When she graduated from my alma mater. Actually, let me tell you, too, when she decided that she was going to attend my alma mater for college, because she was saying the entire time from her freshman year in college up until October in her senior year, Allegheny College would be the last place on earth that she would go to college.
That's a small college, right?
Yes. She didn't want to go anywhere small. She didn't want to follow me either, because she thought I cast a big shadow. And she had been to the college because when my wife and I met, I was in my senior year at Allegheny. So Lauren visited the college before. She visited when I went when I got older too. And so she was like, this won't be the place for me. But she went and visited the college on her own without my wife and I being there. And she said, this is the place where I'm going to go.
On her own.
That was the only place that she completed an application for.
Really?
She was just that confident that she was going to get in, but also the only place where she wanted to go.
I know that made you really happy.
Oh, I was so happy.
I know that made you really
I was so happy. And then when she graduated, graduation day, I know it was her day, but it was really my day too.
Right. Exactly. Now, I heard you say something that you say you cast a big shadow.
Yeah.
And doing that, how do you think that affect and your life at home with your wife, your family, and everyone? How you think that role? How you think they fit into that? Do you think it was something hard for them to get? Or do you think your kids resent that a little bit? Or
I know they do.
Right.
Because they told their mom.
Exactly.
And she told me.
Right. That's what happens to me. They don't never tell me. They tell her.
They told her.
Your kids are mad at you. Right? Yeah, well, you should apologize for what you said. In my case, it's always, you should apologize for what you said. So that kind of thing.
My daughter and my son said he always expects so much out of us. And he wants us to be the top and everything. She said, that's hard. And I said to her, to my wife, without relaying this, but hopefully she would relay that back to them. I said, I expect the best out of them because I know that they can do it. They have the skills, they've got the tools, they have us to lean on. And so that's why I expect that out of them, because I know that they possess all those things to meet my expectations. So
would you call yourself a strict parent? I'll give you an example. You think you were more of a Huxtable type of guy? Was you James Evans? Was you Cliff Huxtable? James Evans?
I was probably more Cliff than James. And, you know, James was more, he was tough.
James was tough.
Yeah, James was tough. I think my wife was a mixture between James and Florida.
Oh, she was more.
My wife can be tough when it comes to Lauren. I'm probably tougher when it comes to Mike.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm tougher when it comes to Mike.
That's usually how it is.
Yeah.
I'm in a household full of women.
Ooh.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Yeah, I'm tough on everybody. I just try to say tough. So let's talk about your son. I know that's your boy. Your son,
that is.
That's my man. So let's talk about. So what is Mike doing these days?
Mike is a college graduate, thank God. He is working now at a mortgage firm, but he wants to actually get into his field. He has a degree in sports management, bachelor's of science in sports management. And he has always been somebody who has loved sports, be it basketball, football, all that. He's a top-notch athlete, for one. Way better athlete than I can ever think that I would want to be.
But you invested a lot into making him one.
I did.
So that's the difference.
Yeah, that's true. And his drive is way different than mine. And his athletic, his athletic ability is way higher than mine too.
And the reason why I say that is not to take nothing from any of this thing, but just in the way that we raise our kids and we do our kids. I know during that process that just talking to you or keeping up with you, you were always having him at a gym. You were always getting him personal training. He was at a great school where they perfected basketball and that kind of thing. So in doing that and giving a person all of that helps them along the way. The same drive you had, it just wasn't in sports because you decided, I'm not going to let sports get me out of here. I'm going to let it be something else to get me out of here. Same drive. Yours was just focused in, his is focused in sports with a big help.
Yes,
from his mom.
And his mom, but I think I was
from the family.
From the family. But I was a huge driver for him, and so with Michael, anything that he puts his mind to, he's gonna attack it, and he's not gonna be satisfied until he completes it and completes it at a high level. I'm just looking forward to him getting into his field because COVID-19 really did had a huge impact on his ability to be able to go into the field that he chose. So he's right now just biding his time because he wants to coach at some point. I believe, or at least be involved in sports on the management side in some way, shape, or form. So that's what I'm looking forward to him doing at some point. He, along with his sister, are both getting married next year.
Both of them getting married.
Both getting married next year. She gets married first, which means that most of my money goes towards hers. We already gave Mike a pretty sizable down payment on his wedding, and he gets married a month after his sister. Yeah, and they're establishing roots here.
So you, on this marriage thing, so you got to pay for your daughter's wedding?
Oh, yeah.
On that. Arabs, my friend Sam, he's Muslim, Arab, Palestinian. In their culture, the in-laws,
right? They pay
you for your daughter,
yes,
because they feel they taking something from you. That's your daughter, your pride and joy. So they actually pay you, and they take care of all of that. But in our culture,
the dowry, we don't do that.
They don't do that. I just don't get it. I don't get it. But I understand. I got 3 girls. So
you know. I'm glad it's just one.
Yeah.
But my son, he was like, hold on. He said, why do you have to pay everything for Lauren? I want you guys to pay something for mine too. And we were telling him, Mike, that's not how it works, really.
Right.
But we still did it. We still gave him a size.
That's how kids are. Though. If you buy one person, you got to do the other. It never fails, and they can get old and still do the same thing.
They're 6 years apart, but you would think that they were born maybe a year or 2 apart. That's how close they are, and how much they want.
From your experience of what you've been dealing with the courts and dealing with parenting and parents that goes through there, the type of experience you've been going through with your kids, and they're now moving on and went through college and now getting married. I'm gonna give you an opportunity to give us some really good, solid parenting advice that you think that you didn't know then, that you was like, you know what, now that I got through it, what would you say that would be?
You've got to be willing to communicate with your kids at their level. So you got to find out what their interests are. And then I think that opens the doors for them to being a little bit more vocal with you and not hiding things from you. I think that you've got to be strict enough to say, monitor where they're going, what they're looking at, who they are with, because a lot of
That's
times,
very important.
Parents, they're oblivious to what their kids are doing until the police are knocking on the door, and that doesn't help the kid or the parent. And so that's what I've learned from being a parent and then going through the court system, not going through, but being presiding over the court system and seeing these cases come in and parents being shocked at what's going on with their kids.
I think it's much better to be proactive and say, hey, I was a helicopter parent versus saying that, oh, I gave them their space, and giving them their space, they down there boiling meth in your basement or out there doing everything because you gave them space, and they really was looking for you to be all in their business, and you didn't do that. So I'm a very firm believer in that, and it might drive people crazy, but hey, until you get to a certain point, I just think that's where we're going to always be at, you know.
Alfred Miller, Al told me something right before Mike was born, because I was so excited about just my first child born, and I was like, yeah, I'm more excited than nervous. And he said, once they're born, from that day on, you're going to be you should be worried, concerned enough where you are following up on what they're doing, watching what they're doing, making sure that you're creating the right guidance and steps for them. He says, because that's what a good parent does. And I said, I didn't think about it that way. I'm just going to be excited that he's here. I can feed him, I can bathe him and kiss on him and love him. He said, yeah, being worried though does, give you more urgency about making sure that you're protective of your kids.
I was looking at the news today, and I just don't understand how we feel we're going to fight the battle about gun violence and guns that are hitting our streets, but legislators are passing laws to make it easier for people to get guns. I just don't understand how the governor or anybody passed legislation to make it easier for you to get a gun. And here goes the other caveat to it. You know that you cannot get a CCW license if you have a marijuana license. So you either gonna get your marijuana license or you could get a CCW license, right? You can't get them both. Now they just made it so that you could get them both
right
now.
Because they're removing the
requirements for you to have to go to CCW classes or anything else in order to get a gun. So my question to you, is what do you think people are doing today that you just think is really messed up, and you think that I just don't understand why you wear your pants like that? And you got a lot going through your court, so you got a lot. I know you sit up there and be like, I just don't understand why you guys.
What really boggles my mind sometimes is cases where young people are there and it's a retaliation because of the fact that someone was walking on their street. And so it's like they are entitled to that area. And no one else can come through that area.
Don't own no real estate, no businesses or anything there. Don't own nothing.
And so you think that it's okay to engage in some physical altercation that at times leads to someone actually dying because someone from another neighborhood is walking in your neighborhood. Now that person isn't causing any problems, isn't trying to attack anyone. They're just there in that neighborhood. And so that is befuddling to me, that you would think that it's okay to start a fight or to do something worse, to shoot them or to stab them or anything that results in somebody being harmed. Parents who think that it's okay to allow their children to have unfettered access to the internet, knowing that there are so many influencers out there that could encourage their children to engage in behaviors that expose them to so many dangerous situations. So, like we were talking before about parents not monitoring them, but just, let them do whatever they want. I just don't get it. And then they're shocked or surprised that the kids are before us, not as alleged delinquents, but victims. These young ladies who are on their phones sending out pictures to the boys. And they're nude, and then they think that this young man loves them, and next thing they know, it's spread on the internet, it's spread throughout the school, and the kids don't realize, the girls don't realize, what they've done is illegal. The parents, thinking they're just the victim, but they're both a victim and they're a perpetrator as well of, violating the law. So things like that, parents, just not being compliant. Watching the kids. And then also, what I just don't understand sometimes is parents whose children have been taken away from the agency. And they give them a plan for them to be able to have their kids reunited. And the parents just completely ignore the plan. Just don't do it. But yet they come in the court and they're arguing that, my kids should be returned to me. But you haven't done, the minimal that's needed for the agency to trust that these children won't be neglected, won't be abused, won't be dependent anymore. And I'm like, it's just that easy, and people aren't doing it. You just
don't understand how they.
I don't understand why they won't do it.
What's the most common thing that's coming through the juvenile court? What you seeing more cases of these days?
Unfortunately, the aggravated robberies with gun specs.
Everybody got a gun.
Yes. Carjackings. If they're not carjacking somebody, it's shooting into a habitation, shooting up someone's home. Those are the ones that I'm seeing the most. We have a lot of youth involved in either attempted murders or actually murders. So they're accused of killing someone or acting in concert with someone who has been killed, or there's attempted murder. So we're getting more of the more serious cases, but then our dockets are reducing with respect to the I'm gonna say minor cases like petty theft or grand theft.
So what do you think we can do to get the guns off the street? I mean, from your perspective, I know, hell, the gun buyback ain't gonna work because everybody want to keep their guns. There's more people getting guns now than before. I don't know. How do you get the guns off the streets?
I mean, passing legislation that reduces restrictions on gun ownership, I think is problematic. They should be doing more to limit people being able to have weapons. I think they need to close the loop that they have with respect to these gun shows where people can go and purchase these weapons. Manufacturers, they've got gun manufacturers. They got a hold on legislation for legislators. So I think the market is saturated with weapons, and if there's any way to reduce the amount of weapons in terms of producing the weapons or selling the weapons to individuals, I think that needs to be corrected, because I don't see any other way of doing it, because, the people who are using the weapons for illicit purposes, they're gonna find ways to get them, and then those who are doing it legitimately, they want to be protected, and so now you have this overabundance of weapons, and for those young people who can't get them either by buying them or they don't have the authority to be in possession of them, they're finding them in other ways. They're going to go and steal them from somebody who legitimately has them.
Are you asking these guys in court, where are you getting the guns from and that? Or is that question being asked, and where most of them are saying they're getting them from?
They won't reveal where they're getting the weapons.
Really?
They won't tell. Sometimes, though the facts bear out where they get them, they are robbing someone, and the person might have a gun in their possession, so they take the gun. They may have guns in their cars, and so they are, stealing the cars and at the time stealing the guns.
Right.
Burglarizing homes, knowing that person has a weapon, and they only go in for that purpose, to get the gun. You've heard numerous times where these young people have burglarized the gun shops. I had kids who have taken cars and rammed them into the back of the gun shop or into the front, and they're going and they're just taking the guns and the ammunition. So, we're trying to, contend with that. Sometimes as a court, we try to send a message with these gun cases in terms of, well, I won't say we do, but the legislature said, listen, if a youth is found delinquent of a 3-year gun spec and it's not a complicity argument, you don't have any discretion, Judge. You have to send them to ODYS. And so that way, the legislature is saying maybe that's a way of trying to reduce the amount of people with guns, because they know that there's a potential penalty, but most kids don't even know that. And some of them don't care because they're saying that I need the guns for protection.
Do you really think they need them for protection?
No. It's about using the guns for status in the community if they're not using them for illicit purposes.
Now, what do you think about criminal justice reform?
I think it's needed, especially.
And what do you? Yeah, go ahead.
When you look at the number of people who are confined and the race of the individuals who are confined, I don't have numbers in my court, definite numbers, but I can see, in 1 week. And I'll just say this week, of all the alleged delinquents that were there or kids that I had to impose disposition, which is sentencing for young people, only one of them was non-African American. Only one. And that is usually what I see, or sometimes it's all African American, and generally African American males. And so,
from a particular area,
Cleveland. We get Cleveland, East Cleveland.
When you say that, more southeast, northeast side.
It doesn't matter.
Don't matter.
Doesn't matter. Just the city of Cleveland proper. Maple Heights. We're starting to get more kids from Maple Heights.
Really?
Yeah. Garfield Heights. Cleveland Heights, when I first started, they were trending, towards having a lot of kids, but I haven't had that many Cleveland Heights kids. And so, it's an issue, I think, sometimes of, we talk about criminal reform, not just the courts, but at the commencement of the criminal justice system, police, using their discretion, sometimes maybe not to charge kids with, these offenses, using the juvenile volunteer magistrate program or the diversion programs that we have.
That was going to be one of the questions I was going to ask you. How do you think we can reduce the amount of people that you're being charged or being faced? You think there's some overcharging in some of the cases? I can see it,
especially when I do probable cause hearings, and those are the hearings to determine whether or not to buy a youth over. There'll be many times where the state doesn't meet their burden, and I'm like, why bring the charge in the first place? Some of the charges, they have enough evidence for that, but other charges, no. And so I'll find that there's no probable cause. Why bring all of these charges when they're not going to hold up? So truth in charging I think is needed. I think Justice Michael Donnelly was talking about that initiative and hoping that would catch fire with some of the prosecutors throughout the state. In terms of sentencing, I think putting people in prison for nonviolent offenses is a waste of resources. Making sure that there's equity with respect to sentencing. So I'm a huge proponent, and Justice Donnelly and I were talking about this the other day, of doing a bank where the judges, and it could be anonymous, send their particular dispositions or sentencings to this particular bank that all of us can look at to see, okay, these particular facts fit the case that I have, and I want to have a range of sentencing. We're not going to say we're going to limit
so they
the
don't
judge.
Go to your court and you give them 20 years.
And somebody else, they get 10 or 5 years
right.
or get probation.
Right.
I think that would.
But isn't that the law? Isn't every offense there's some sentence of the number attached to that?
Well, there's minimum and maximum.
Well, that's the judge, right?
That is, but in between that is the
gray area.
Is the discretion. But if they look at what other judges are doing,
they give them some type of perspective.
Yeah, and they can say, well, as I measure up to this other judge, maybe I need to think about how I'm sentencing. And Justice Donnelly has something, and it was a good example. A judge in Franklin County was about to sentence someone, and the lawyer for the defendant was able, I don't know how they got this, they were able to acquire sentences for the same type of offense. The person was similarly situated with the other defendants in terms of their record in the system. Similarly situated with respect to what happened to the victim in those cases. And there was a range of sentences, and the prosecutor proposed a very lengthy sentence. But when the judge got the motion from the defense attorney and looked at that motion and saw that the majority of the sentences for that particular offense, similarly situated defendant, was way lower than what the prosecutor
was proposing.
And the judge went with the defense attorney. So that leads me to believe that we should be doing that more often. And I think that would create more confidence in the judicial system, and people wouldn't see it as being so unfair and one-sided.
My son, I got 2 sons. I got a similar situation, but I have another son. His name Brandon. He has some friends. Him and my son, they had some friends live out in Seven Hills, I think it was. Their grandmother would take them out there to visit their friends. And Brandon is one of these kids. He used to run around, backflips. He just do all kinds of stuff. And so, out there, none of the houses have fences, so it's all one big yard. So he was out there playing with his friends, and I guess the neighbors had a little Shih Tzu, a little dog come out running. So Brandon running around with the dog. Dude called the police and said that Brandon was breaking into his garage.
What?
And so the police came out there to Seven Hills, and Brandon, he's juvenile because he's going to juvenile court. He goes in and go through all of this. They immediately called me, hey, Dad, I got this court date or whatnot. It's in juvenile court. And, let me know what's up. So I immediately do what I need to do. And we get ready to go to juvenile court. It's in one of my friend's courtroom, I would say. And they said, okay. And I'm going to this point because I think it's very important, not just the judges, but their magistrates are really more important than anything, because the judge didn't deal with this. It went to their magistrate.
Okay.
So their magistrate got it, and that magistrate is running for judge and always trying to run for something. But this person, when Brandon went in front of him, he said, and I told him who I was and everything, knew everything, and I said, we went through the case. My son ain't breaking in nobody's garages. I mean, why? He don't do that kind of stuff out there. He said, well, we're going to make him plea. I said, what I'm pleading for? He was like, because, man, if these people come from Seven Hills in here and it's a black kid versus them, they're going to go ahead and side with them. I said, well, no, that's some bull crap, man. That's the problem. As I was on this kick, y'all always making black people say, I went through my thing. And you know what he told me? He said, did you know your son smoked weed? I said, what you mean? He said, we gave him a test. He smoked weed. And so I'm just letting you know that when you're making this decision about you want to fight this or not. And I looked at him, I said, man, one thing ain't got nothing to do with the other. You trying to drop this on me because you want me to get all upset at him, but I'm still telling you, he didn't break in this man's garage.
Right.
But in the interim, out of all of that, he ended up having to settle for that, ended up getting on probation, had to do his thing in a can or whatever because, piss in the cup because he had to go through the probational period or whatever, and that's happened. And it was a magistrate that's still there today. That actually did that. And so I tell you that I know it's one thing as a judge that you do it, but you also have magistrates that you have down there that you assign to these cases. And I think it's equally important that you guys set the standard for what you guys expect them to do. Because hell, I got railroaded and you know who I am. So I'm sitting back like, wow, I can't imagine the average person who come in here, same situation, who has a kid who didn't do anything. He simply didn't do that. And this is what happened. And I truly believe that if we would have went to the next step, the people probably wouldn't even showed up. He ended up getting probation behind that. And that's why I say that I think, your standards of what you guys said with your magistrate is important. Who is your magistrate you got over there now?
I have Magistrate Tracy Martin Peebles. Her dad was John Martin.
Yes, I know Tracy very well, yeah.
And so for me, I looked for a magistrate who had, at least the second time, who had both prosecutor experience, but had been a defense attorney too, because that's what I did before I became a magistrate. I was a prosecutor, and then I was a defense attorney. And so those type of people have a balance when they're making those decisions. So we listen a little bit more attentively to the evidence, because we know that just because the prosecutor says it so doesn't mean that it is. Just because a witness comes in and says something doesn't mean that it is. We have the ability to be able to discern because of our time as defense attorneys and also as prosecutors, because we know what standards the prosecutor must meet in order to have someone be found delinquent or guilty. And so for me, and I get a lot of trials. Maybe it's just because of who I am, and people know that I'm going to be fair, and I'm going to listen to the evidence, and I'm going to weigh it like I'm supposed to. If they haven't met their burden of proof, it's out of here.
Right.
And there are times when you can see, and you're like, because they'll tell me something initially, and then when we come to trial, I'm mad because the prosecutor hasn't told me everything up front, and they're not necessarily required to at the pretrial stage. And so they also don't know how their witness is going to testify either. So, sometimes I'm sitting there like, this is a colossal waste of time. This person did not do what they're accusing them of doing.
So what do you think judges can do to do better?
For me, I ask questions. Some judges, they just let the prosecutor do their job, or defense attorney do their job. But, you've got to be alert, aware, conscious of what's going on. You've got to, you can read the complaint, what it says, and be aware of people, know people. So sometimes, we take a lot of, CLE classes, and they try to get you to, to try to understand when people are testifying, how they're testifying, who's being truthful, to listen when people are testifying. And for me, people are being inconsistent. That could be the officer being inconsistent. It could be alleged victim being inconsistent. Those are major factors in for a judge or magistrate to be able to look at and see if someone is telling them the truth.
So let's talk about the next steps for the judge. I know we talked. I tell people a story all the time. I said, Micheal Ryan ran for Congress. I said, me and Mike got together one night and decided that the spot. Many people don't know, but Judge Ryan here ran for Congress. We tried to take the seat that Marcia Fudge was holding after Stephanie had died, and there was a vacancy, and we should put Micheal Ryan, young Micheal Ryan, into that seat, because at that time I said, hey, if Micheal get in there, he'll be congressman for the next 100 years. I said, hell, he's young enough now. I said, we'll break Lou Stokes' record easily. And we went through the process, went all the way there. I remember you sat at the house, man, and we stayed up to about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. You wrote that whole speech, your whole book.
Did.
Basically, your whole book, you wrote that in a speech. And I tell people the story all the time because it's funny. I said, we got there. I said, Mike was rolling. He was rolling with me. We got all the way there. I said, we started counting the votes walking through the door. Mike said, do we got it? I said, man, we're about to get crushed. And you was like, well, what should we do? And I was like, hey, man, you worked too hard on that damn speech. Get up there, say that damn speech. After you say the speech, give your votes to Marcia Fudge and let's get the hell up out of here. And that's exactly what you did. But what was remarkable about that was that everybody who was there remembered the speech. They remember that the speech was very, very powerful. I remember the sigh in the whole room when you said you wasn't running. Everybody was like, what? No? And made me look like, now y'all gonna vote for it? What is this? Y'all gonna vote now?
Maybe I should change my mind.
Right. We was like, maybe we should what? And we went ahead and you moved forward. And after that, things got better. Marcia hooked up and wanted to talk to me, and you had moved on and became judge and started doing that. Started breaking the records as it relates to being the first in a few courtrooms and being judge in a few places. So with that, now I hear that you plan on doing something new.
The new thing is that one of the factors for me even contemplating running for judge was due to Larry A. Jones Sr. He just, took me under his wing. Like Mike, he says, you got a good record as a magistrate, and he says you're known in the community just because of the work that I have been doing. He says, think about running for judge. He created a plan for me, and next thing I know, I'm part of the 100 Black men of Greater Cleveland. I'm going with him to Glenville Rec. I'm over at his house when he's having New Year's Day, and he has all these politicians at his house. I'm at his house for July 4th, where he really only invites family and really close friends. So I'm there for that. I'm there when he had his annual picnic, and all the while he's introducing me to more people. We just had a really good relationship. Him and Earl, they got me in a corner and told me, listen, we want you to do this. And so I followed their lead. I lost my first ever judicial race, and I was like, this isn't fun. But he said, and he brought me back. He says, no, that was purposeful. Now this is what you do to win. When I won, he was the one who swore me in. When I won again, so I won in 2005, then I won in 2011 without opposition. He swore me in. Then in 2012, when I ran for juvenile court, I had my councilman at that time, he swore me in. And then in 2016, when I won again, there's Judge Jones again swearing me in. In October, when I got the news that he died, I was devastated. Here's a friend, here's a mentor, colleague at one point, because we were both judges on Cleveland Municipal Court bench at the same time. And we had always talked about succession. And when he died, he was on the Court of Appeals. He was one of only 2 African-American male Court of Appeal judges in the state. So there's 69. And right now, only one of them is African-American male.
Really?
And so in 2026, when he was scheduled to retire, we always talked about, yeah, Mike, I'm going to retire. And I expect you, to run for that seat. Because even when he used to swear me in, I would go over to the Court of Appeals to get sworn in. He said, look at these chambers. They're smaller than the ones that we have. He says, but he said, Mike, you're going to love it over here. He says, I'm telling you, you've got to run. Make sure he says, are you preparing? I was like, yes, Judge, but I'm doing the work I'm doing now.
Right.
He says, but he says, I want you to run. And so when he died, it's a hard decision for me, because I have to choose between staying a juvenile court judge or running for Court of Appeals.
Let's stay on that point, because you are going to be giving up something that we talked about, that we know per you growing up, the experience that you give to those young men, the role model that they see when they come in there in your story. You giving that up.
I am.
All right?
I am.
And you're going over to appeals to do appeal court work, right?
Right. But even doing that, as an appeal court judge, I actually look at everything that's done in juvenile court, and not just my own singular.
So you'll still be doing juvenile stuff?
I'll still be reviewing juvenile work.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
And as a Court of Appeals judge, you review the Cleveland Municipal Court decisions. You review juvenile court decisions. You review Common Pleas Court General Division decisions. You review domestic relations decisions and probate court decisions.
That's interesting.
And so, while I had the effect over my own docket, now I can look at what my colleagues were doing and either affirm them because they're doing it right, or send it back to them because I don't think that they're doing it correctly.
Now, in that position, could you do similar to what you said Judge Donnelly is doing with that bank that he's trying to pull together?
I can still advocate for that kind of system, and believe that it's still essential. We as judges, we can always advocate for the advancement or improvement of the law. And I believe that type of system, that bank system, is something that will be an improvement on the law, because it improves how the law is viewed by the public, but also in terms of how judges decide cases and do sentencing. I think that would be something that I can work on in addition to the appeal work. And I also still wouldn't lose my connection with young people, because I do a lot of preventative work. I'm on numerous boards that deal with young people and access to opportunities for them. But my work in the schools, in doing panel discussions, that stuff won't stop.
Okay.
In fact, I think it will increase, because as a Court of Appeals judge, you don't have as many cases that you hear on a daily basis, so that frees up opportunity to be more involved with the schools and young people as well.
So your campaign is off and running? You made the decision? That's what you're doing?
Yes, it's off and running.
So
I've collected the signatures that I need. It's just the actually filing that's necessary. So when you talk about 20 years of judicial experience, I have that. 4 years as a magistrate, 16 years as a judge, former prosecutor, former defense attorney, personal injury attorney, employment law. I've been a law clerk for in the city of Cleveland, so I did a lot of research and writing as a law clerk for 2 years. Been the administrator for the Office of Professional Standards, so that deals with, complaints that are levied against police. It runs the gambit, and those are the type of issues that I'll see as a Court of Appeals judge. So, I say there won't be anything that really surprises me. As a a judge for juvenile court, I've handled things as major as murder case to as minor as jaywalking. Cleveland Municipal Court, domestic violence and whatnot. I've also taught other judges. And one last thing I'll say in terms of what the experience I have that is similar to what a Court of Appeals judge does is that as a judge, especially in the juvenile court, I am responsible for reviewing magistrates' decisions when people object to those decisions. So I have to actually go and get a transcript, read the transcript, and determine if the magistrate acted lawfully or did they act arbitrarily or did they do something unconscionable. And then I have to write an opinion on that and either send it back to the magistrate or find the magistrate was accurate in their decision. And that's what Court of Appeal judges do. They get the transcript, or sometimes they get an opportunity to have an argument be made by the opposing attorneys. They review that, and then they vote on it. And who's ever the person that's required to write, then they write the opinion.
I got one last question for you. And it's just something goes all off. I want you to tell me something that you think most people take for granted these days.
Family, thinking that, family is always going to be supportive of them. The family is always going to be there. Family's not always going to be there. Don't take family for granted.
Judge, I want to thank you for coming on our show today. You did very well, and
Thank you.
We had a good time. I'm going to let you look right there in that camera and let everybody know that what the judge has in store coming up. If there's information they can reach you at or any of that, you can do that right now.
My name is, again, Judge Micheal J.Ryan, Court of Common Pleas Juvenile Division, at least for the next year. I am running for judge for the Court of Appeals. That's the 8th District for Ohio. Thank you in advance for your vote, your support, your endorsement. You see my name on the ballot. Please put an X by Micheal J.Ryan. Fill it in. Fill in Micheal J.Ryan. I would, you can go to Facebook or Twitter to connect with me. I am DeLand Judge on Twitter. That's DALANDJUDGE. And then on Facebook, I'm Micheal Ryan. The older, handsomer. No, I'm just joking. I'm the older one. My son is much more handsome than me.
Excellent. Thanks again, Jeff.
Thank you.